Break.
Oh.
No, if I clean tonight.
Yeah.
This is all. But I have.
We have to go into your
Good morning. The time is now 10:01 and we'd like to call to order the CRTPO Technical Coordinating Committee meeting for February 2nd, 2023. We'll go around the room and do introductions. We'll start to my left in the corner and we'll go around the table and then we'll go to the left-hand side of the room and introduce staff and visitors that are with us today.
Tracy Howe, pedestrian focus.
Heather Maloney, Town of Huntersville.
Erica Martin, Town of Mooresville.
Rich Hoffman, Iredell County.
Theo Gatea, Division 10.
Todd Huntsinger, Indian Trail.
Bjorn Hansen, Union County.
Lisa Thompson, Town of Waxhaw.
Genesis Harris, City of Statesville.
Dan Lever, Charlotte General Services.
Candace Rory, Planning. Charlotte Planning, sorry.
Andrew Ventresca, Town of Troutman.
Travis Johnson, CRTPO.
Liz Babson, City of Charlotte.
David McDonald with Cats.
Travis Morgan, Town of Pineville.
Anil Panikar, NCDOT Division 12.
Alex Remendi, bicycle focus rep.
Andrew Golden, Town of Davidson.
Aaron Tucker, Town of Cornelius.
Megan Green, Mecklenburg County Air Quality.
Dana Stujanki, Town of Matthews.
Steve Fry, Town of Manhattan.
All right, thank you. And we'll go into the staff side of the room. Bob.
CRTPO. Gilbert, CRTPO. Warren Goodsey, Gordon. Will Washington, town of Mooresville. Brian Elbert, CRTPO.
Right, now on our right.
Jennifer Stafford, CRTPO. Joe Johnson, CRTPO. And Joe Iron.
They're all there. CRTPO.
Tiffany Good, CRTPO.
Just around the town of Stellan.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the agenda. We need to adopt today's agenda. May I have a motion? And a second? All,
Okay, thank you.
you got it? Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Next item, we need to adopt today's consent agenda. We have a number of items on here, so bear with me while I read those. Approval of the January 5th, 2023 TCC minutes, 2020-2029 TIP amendments, CRTPO public involvement plan update, federal functional classification revisions resolution, NCDOT paved trail and sidewalk feasibility study grant program Carolina Thread Trail, NCDOT paved trail and sidewalk feasibility study grant program Iredell County. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving on to today's agenda, we have one business item and we're going to hear from Andrew Ventresca on the CRTPO discretionary funds project call and their recommendation for projects.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I hope everybody's doing well on this extremely moist morning. Today, we are actually looking for action today, finally, on the POC recommendation of discretionary funding for the 2022 fall call. This does include recommendation of a resolution for the CMAQ funds. That's just part of the process. So this is a two-part action requested. This slide should look familiar, and I hope it's the last time I have to show this body. This is just a summary of the applications we've received. We did receive 34 applications. We did receive a request of 79.7 million. We do have 59.1 million available, so that leaves a $20.6 million shortfall on the requested applications. This is the recommended highway projects that the POC is recommending. This has not changed since last month. All of the information and scoring is in your agenda packet. The total recommend for highway projects is 36 million. This is a non-highway recommended project summary. This has changed a bit since last month. We had some discussion last month regarding the electric vehicle bus charger project from CATS. CATS has reduced their request by about $2 million. With that, that freed up enough funding to fund the next bike ped project on the list, which is the Davidson Beatty Street shared use path project. So with that, POC is recommending moving forward with funding that project this time around as well. Total with bike ped projects is 22.1 million. These are the planning projects that have been submitted. Once again, we are allowed to spend about 1% of our total funding on planning projects. The 5 projects you see ahead of you are the same as last month. Nothing's changed here. So again, information was in your agenda packet. This is just a summary of the funding and the percentage of each mode. As you can see, we've got 62% of total funding we're recommending to highway projects, 25% to bicycle and pedestrian projects, 12% to the carbon reduction projects, and that 1% to the planning projects. This does total 59.1 million. So we are recommending to allocate all the funds we have available. Again, the action is to get a recommendation from TOC to approve the recommendation from the POC, and this will go to the board later on this month for final approval. And with that, I will open it up for any questions.
I don't have a question, just a comment. Just a quick comment. Town of Matthews, we appreciate reduction of the request from CATS for us to get fully funded. Small jurisdiction, 32,000. It's hard for us to come up with cash, so we appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, we need to take action. May I have a motion to recommend that the CRTPO board approve discretionary funds for the projects recommended for the fall 22 project call and amend the 2020-2029 TIP to add the funding allocations to new and existing projects, and recommend that the CRTPO board approve a resolution to endorse 4 CMAQ applications to NCDOT for $9,616,300.
I'll make
Ma'am.
that motion.
Thank you. And a second? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the POC. This is a tremendous amount of work, and I know you all meet frequently between meetings to get this work done, and we appreciate all that you do. All right, moving on to our next item. We have several information reports. First, we're going to hear from Jarrell Leonard on the proposed transit work group.
Good morning, everyone. So in 2019, there was a staffing and resources study that called for the creation of a transit planner position. This position mainly was to work on better coordination, as well as advancing transit planning into all the MPO processes handled by CRTPO, specifically better coordination between CATS, CDOT, and also CRTPO itself. In the summer of 2021, CRTPO had conducted interviews with different transit providers in our area, mainly the ones that are non-CATS, to find out which way we could move forward advancing these efforts. And one of the main things that they recommended was the formation of a transit providers work group, and also that this work group should meet quarterly. In the summer of 2022, to try to make sure the efforts was followed up and consistent with the prior efforts of the summer of 2021, we met with the leadership of the TEI task force, which was basically wrapped up. And one of the recommendations was to compose a proposal to give to the CRTPO board leadership, but also to do a survey to consider the gauging of the transit providers and formalization of how they wanted to handle a transit work group, or if the transit work group interest was even there. In fall 2022, CRTPO actually issued the survey, which went out, and the overall results showed that a work group was something that was considered desirable from the respondents of the survey. The following slides are going to show you the results of the survey. And as you can see, 77% overwhelmingly said that they believe a work group should be established. How frequently the work group should be held? Most respondents, showing 33%, agreed that it should meet quarterly. And also respondents said that Connect Beyond should be incorporated into this work group's efforts. It may not be a direct task, but it will be integrated in all the activities that work group considers. So here's some of the topics that show that they ranked: performance-based planning, compliance, 5307 MOU, which was done in the summer of 2021, 5303 program assistance, 5307, federal discretionary for transit, competitive grants programs, collaboration amongst themselves, service coordination, specifically for CRTPO planning area providers, resource sharing, and also just improved communication with NCDOT Integrated Mobility Division. And the following shows the topics, how they were ranked the highest amongst the respondents: resource sharing, 5303 and 5307 funding assistance, performance-based planning, 5307 MOU work, and also the compliance with the federal and state grant funding programs. So the purpose of this task force would be also to be mainly to provide means for coordination and collaboration for those transportation providers. And that also includes CDOT, 5303, 5307 MOU activities, such as the one that I just mentioned a second ago that was approved by board in summer of 2021. Performance-based planning, which focuses on TAMS, which is asset management, the transit agency safety plans, which all transit providers must do that receive 5307 funds. Also, coordination with all the activities that CRTPO are federally mandated, UPWP, TIP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and Comprehensive Transportation Plan that's enforced by the state of North Carolina. The work group would have relevant staffers from the following agencies: CATS, Union County Transportation, Mecklenburg County Transportation System, ICATS, which is also the Iredell County Transit System, Central Liner Regional Council, NCDOT Integrated Mobility, and ex officio members from relevant transportation agencies, planning agencies such as CDOT, and so on and so forth. And just this past month in January 2023, we presented those results of the survey to the CRTPO board leadership, and they pretty much unanimously said that we should present this to TCC and board in February, hence why we're here. In March, we're going to come back to TCC to request action from both you all and also the board on this for the formation of a transit providers work group. Any questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious, with the survey results you showed, how many respondents, I guess, did you get? And were those surveys sent out to the potential members that you had listed?
Yes, sir. So we got 9 responses, and we see responses from all of those who were listed from CATS to CDOT.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Jarrell? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Travis, who's going to give us an update on the 2024-2033 CRTPO TIP.
Jarrell, do you need your mask? Jarrell, do you need your mask? Well, hello, everyone. You were here to give you an update on the 2024-2033 TIP program update. We're going to talk about the TIP, just remind everyone where we are in this process, talk about next steps, and remind everyone of P7.0, which is upcoming. So again, the STIP is a requirement of FHWA. NCDOT must adopt a new STIP every 4 years, and typically it follows a 2-year development cycle in North Carolina. NPO's TIPs are incorporated directly without change in North Carolina's STIP. This list is fiscally constrained, and it conforms with state implementation plan for air quality. It must conform with that. And so CRTPO is also inside of the maintenance status for ozone. Our requirements are to ensure that TIP is consistent with NCDOT STIP. Amendments must be made to the current MTP, which is the 2050. And then we have to meet the air quality conformity determination requirements. So for this STIP development, it was started based upon the previous P6.0 project list. It was a start from scratch to build the next STIP. This developed a list of delivery projects, first funded based upon upcoming let dates and right-of-way purchases and grants. Then they took the list or determined which of the remaining 2020-29 funded projects remained in this STIP, and they used a seniority approach to assign projects from P3, P4, and P5. So again, this was built off of P6.0. They took the projects and assigned them based upon what was available for funding, and they used the seniority approach for P3, P4, P5. In addition to this is when we also had the opportunity to exchange projects of equal or lesser value within 10% of overall total project cost. So NCDOT released the revised STIP in August 4th of 2022. We then completed all of our project schedule exchanges by October 30th. And again, we did 3 projects. Sorry, there were 5 projects that were exchanged all together in exchange for 2. So that was September 21st, we approved the exchange of 2 sections of US 74 Independence Boulevard. Then October 19th meeting, we approved the exchange of Idlewild Road for Lawyers Road and Independence Point Parkway. After that, the draft 2033-2024 STIP was released for public comment by NCDOT in December of 2022. So that brings us up to where we are now. In March, we're going to be asked to open a public comment period for the conformity determination report, the 2050 MTP amendments, and then the updated draft of the 2024-2033 TIP. This public comment period will last for 30 days and will cover March and April. This information will then come to the CRTPO, TCC, and board in June as an information item. The NCTO DOT board will act on the STIP adoption in June, and then TCC will be asked to make a recommendation, and the board will be asked to adopt the determination report, the amendments, and the draft TIP in July. Additionally, we've been working on the prioritization 7.0 schedule. So this process started in fall of 2022. The Board of Transportation is looking to approve the recommendations from the work group in the spring of 2023. And then we will open up a submittal for NPOs, RPOs, and NCTOT divisions to submit new projects. And that's what will open in July and September of 2023. P7 scoring will begin in fall of 2023. And then we should develop, or NCDOT spot office will develop P7 quantitative project scores in October of 2023 till March of 2024. So lots of opportunities for projects coming up in P7.0. And so with that, do we have any questions about the process we're following for TIP or possible P7.0 process?
Any questions for Travis?
Is there any update on projects that got bumped from the TIP? Getting any sort of consideration P7.0?
So they'll be reprioritized as part of the prioritization 7.0 process. So there'll be opportunity to have those projects resubmitted.
Right.
Yeah.
And this might be more of a question for Neil. He and I talked kind of offline, asking him to take to the P7 work group any kind of consideration, bonus points or grandfather for projects that got bumped off the TIP. I know that was an uphill battle, or even if not a vertical wall to climb.
Looks like there will be new project submittals. When we first spoke, I wasn't sure if they were going to allow us to submit projects again, but we will receive about the same amount of submittals, so 47 submittals. But you know, unfortunately, the projects that kind of fell out of the TIP that were not included in that process to develop this one, there's a lot of projects like that throughout the state. So I don't think that any project that fell out of the TIP will be treated any differently than a new project per se, or they're all going to have to compete.
Does that answer your question? Yep. Great. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, look forward to coming back to you next month to open up the public comment period. And with that.
Thank you, Travis. All right, next we'll hear an update from Bob Cook on the draft FY24 UPWP.
Morning, everyone. I was thinking about trying to muster Travis's enthusiasm for the UPWP, but I'm just not wired that way. So wanted to give you an update on the status of developing the Unified Planning Work Program, our budget for the next fiscal year. So we'll just go over the usual funding overview to remind you about what is actually available to program. We'll talk about the Section 5303 proposals to help fund transit planning initiatives. We'll go over some draft allocations and then talk about some next steps. So as a reminder, we have those three sources you see listed there, the PL funds, the STB GTA funds, and then again, the Section 5303 funds coming from FTA. And a reminder also about how we pay the local match. PL and DA funds are matched by all member jurisdictions by a formula established in the Memorandum of Understanding. And then the Section 5303 match is provided by the user. So CATS uses 5303 money, CATS provides the match, and same with all the other transit providers as well. So this is our funding summary. This has not changed since we met in January. You can see the federal column there, 1.5, almost 1.6 million actually for PL dollars. The 1.1 million for DA, that is a standard takedown that was established about 2 or 3 years ago by the board. The Section 5303 amount is just over $1 million. That is down from FY23, the current fiscal year. But FY23 was an anomaly when some statewide 5303 money was allocated to all the state's MPOs. So this is getting us back more to the usual allocation being provided. So we have, in terms of federal dollars, $3.7 million, getting close to $3.8 million available for programming next fiscal year. The section 53 proposals, all of them appear to be eligible for eligible activities. And you can see how the funds are allocated there to the different agencies or the initiatives being the Metrolina regional model, for example, using $180,000 of section 5303 funds. That's augmented, by the way, with PL funds for the model. So that's not the only funding source for the MRM, because that is just so vitally important to what we do as an organization. Then we CRTPO uses $100,000 in CRTPO funds to help support Jarrell's activities. It'll help support the work group and all the other things that we are doing on the transit planning side. Andrew talked about these a moment ago, the discretionary program planning studies. These hopefully are the same numbers that Andrew just showed. And these were discussed with the board at their January meeting. No one raised any concerns at that time about funding these as a part of the UPWP. So we are including these in the work program and assume that they will be adopted along with the full work program in March. And the match for these initiatives, by the way, are being provided by the user as well. So Indian Trails Transportation Master Plan, the local match for that will be provided exclusively by Indian Trail. Same thing with Matthews, Mooresville, and Stallings. The Central Line project that will be spread amongst all the jurisdictions, because that's something being done for CRTPO in terms of some education for TCC members and staff. It's a relatively minimal amount, of course. We talked about carryovers the last time. These are projects, local transportation planning projects that are being undertaken by local jurisdictions. They are carrying, they have to be carried over because the planning for these, or the work on these projects wasn't completed during the fiscal year or won't be completed during this fiscal year. So work will extend most likely into fiscal year 24. I think Jennifer brought this up at yesterday's transportation staff meeting. We don't know the exact carryover amount at this point, but we suspect that the amounts will be relatively minimal. So, and Jennifer shaking her head yes, so that's good. And we'll have information. We'll have those final numbers by the time we come back to you at the March meeting for adoption. So now I wanted to get a little bit into allocations. The last time we discussed this, we had percentages listed for the 8 task codes that make up the work program. Now we're getting into more dollar figures at this point, but a couple of caveats here. These are pretty high level estimates at this stage. They don't reflect 5303 allocations, and we have not had a chance to complete the assessment of Q1 and Q2 of the current fiscal year. We're just a little behind on that. Some of the information was delayed, so we have not been able to incorporate that fully into what you're looking at. So what you're seeing now, or what you will see in a moment, will change between now and March. And because of the delay, we will discuss this at an upcoming transportation staff meeting in February. I don't know what that date will be at this point, but sometime next month, we'll go over this in a little bit more detail so that when it comes time to adopt the work program in March, you're not seeing numbers for the first time. So I'll just go through these quickly. Data and planning support, as probably many of you know from previous presentations about the work program. This is where we fund the travel demand model, the land use model, also traffic counts, and then most of our work related to GIS. And we're anticipating about $700,000 being allocated to that task code at this point, likely to change. The planning process, this is that catch-all category in many respects. The biggest thing here will probably be the update to the 2050 MTP. We issued an RFQ for the 2055 MTP work in December. We've had, I think, 5 submittals come in. They're being analyzed now. We hope to have a selection made by probably early March on who to go with, what firm to go with. So a lot of work will start next fiscal year on the MTP. So we're anticipating about $1 million for that particular task code. UPWP, that's a pretty stable undertaking. This doesn't vary much from year to year because it's pretty much the same activity. So we're anticipating a very similar funding level to FY23 at $33,000. The tip on an ongoing activity that Travis just talked about, and this category also funds Jennifer's activities with the discretionary program. And we think at this point about $240,000 is a reasonable amount. Special studies, we don't have a number for that yet because this is mainly those local planning projects we talked about. So the carryovers need to be factored into this task code. We do know what those others are, the ones that Andrew reviewed that came out of the fall call. We just don't know what the carryovers look like at this stage. So that is definitely to be determined. For Title VI and environmental justice, about $20,000. That might be a bit more than what we've programmed this year. We do need to look into whether or not, as an organization, we have to update our Title VI plan. So that might require a little bit more money than we've traditionally programmed. I will say this, we got a question about this allocation at the board meeting. Renee Garner of the town of Matthews asked about EJ, and a lot of the activities associated with environmental justice also fall under other categories, most notably the TIP and also planning process, where we undertake analyses mostly the TIP and planning process, where we undertake analyses of various projects and their impacts on EJ communities. So this is more on the regulatory side than anything else, but there are other EJ activities going on in other categories. So you might see a relatively small number, but again, those some of those actions are taking place in other task codes. For public participation, this includes the website, general public outreach, social media activities, anything related to this topic. About $104,000 we're anticipating for next fiscal year. This would be similar to the current year. Of course, a lot of effort this year was on updating the public involvement plan. And that work is largely done at this point, but we hope to be able to ramp up our public outreach efforts next year now that much of the pandemic is behind us and folks, I think, are more comfortable with in-person activities. So the number will remain, I think, will remain pretty much the same, despite the fact that that public involvement plan process is largely complete. For statewide and extra regional planning, this is where we engage with the North Carolina Association of MPOs, also the national group of AMPO, the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, and the local group CRAFT, and also one-on-one activities with individual MPOs also, but $70,000 at this point seems reasonable. And then lastly, management and operations. A sizable amount of money there, but a sizable amount of work is conducted in this task code. Grants management, the administration of the TCC, and just overall administration efforts are found under this task code. And then one of our major tasks that will be starting probably in the next month or so, even before the fiscal year starts, is reassessing the memorandum of understanding in light of the urban area information being released not too long ago. So that will take up a lot of staff effort during the next fiscal year. So in January, we identified a number of issues that still needed to be dealt with, and I'll just give you an update on those issues. One was we needed to assess those Q1 and Q2 expenditures, and that is underway, not complete, but it's underway. We had to finalize the 5303 allocations, and that is complete, as we mentioned earlier. The TOD grant amount that had to be programmed, this was a grant that CATS received for TOD work on the Silver Line. That is complete. We've determined pretty much that we will program the full amount of that grant in next year's work program. We still have some work to do on the traffic counts matter. Complete streets was another topic where we had to make some decisions on about how to spend that 2.5% funding obligation that came out of the IIJA. And our determination was that we will pretty much focus our efforts just as we are this current fiscal year, where we're looking at active transportation corridors and comparing them against NCDOT's complete streets methodology or policies rather. And then lastly, the carryovers, and that is still, as I mentioned earlier, still pending. So in terms of next steps, we are kind of in the middle of second drafts, having presented this to you today. We'll do the same with the board later on this month. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we will have another transportation staff meeting where we'll talk about the UPWP. And then in March, we'll return for a TCC recommendation and board adoption. And with that, that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, questions for Bob? Go ahead.
Hey, Bob, I have a question about the recent award of the Safe Streets for All that the city of Charlotte received. I'm curious to know if the MPO will be involved in that and if that will be included in the UPWP as well.
I don't know how we'll be involved, but I did see that. I think that would probably have to be reflected in the work program. We can get some guidance on that from Loretta Barron or from NCDO, from the Transportation Planning Division at NCDOT. But if it's used for planning purposes, then it would have to be programmed, but it would be very similar to the TOD grant. It's in there, but we may not touch it as an organization, like with a Todd grant. We might have some involvement with that to a certain degree, but it'll be a CATS initiative. But it's in there because it's a transportation planning initiative, and it has to be shown in a work program.
Thank you.
Bjorn?
Yeah, Bob, I have a question about what the relationship or commitment is from the DOT for all the MPOs and RPOs across the state for public engagement tools like the MetroQuest contract. To know if that's going to continue or if potentially the MPO would have to pick that up and individually in the future.
I've not heard about any changes on that front. So I'm assuming it'll continue as is, status quo. Alex, have you heard anything about that?
No, I haven't. Is Dominique here? I'm not sure if that's a TPD thing or.
Yeah, we'll definitely check with Dominique since he couldn't be here today.
Yeah, I would just ask that if that ever comes up and if that contract slips, having a resource like that individually is expensive, but if it's available to be shared across multiple jurisdictions, it's a lot more reasonable and it's a very valuable tool. And maybe there's new ones that are coming up that could help the individual organizations. So just keep that in mind as a sustainment.
No, that's a good point to ask about that. And for those of you not familiar with what Bjorn is talking about, NCDOT, I guess, has a contract with MetroQuest. It's a great public involvement tool, and all the states MPOs are able to use that tool free of charge. So it can save us a substantial amount of money.
Any more questions? All right, thank you, Bob. I think you're up next.
Yes, indeed.
And now we're going to get an update on the Charlotte urban area boundary.
All right. Just want to talk about 5 different things. First of all, we have good news to start off with. We'll get into some definitions about an urban area and an urban area boundary versus a planning area and a planning area boundary. Different, but very much related. Then there were kind of 3 W's that we'll talk about what happened, why it happened, and where it happened, to the best of our knowledge in some of those cases. We want to talk about Statesville and Marshville and how they're impacted by this new information, and then go over some next steps. So that good news is coming out of the urban area boundary information released from the Census Bureau is that we are not required to change our planning area boundary based upon that the new data coming out. The urban area didn't change in any way that requires us bringing in new municipalities or counties like we did following the 2010 census. And also important to note that those municipalities that are no longer in the Charlotte urban area can still remain as active members of CRTPO. So, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. So first, let's talk about an urban area boundary. These are defined by the Census Bureau for their statistical purposes and their purposes only. Any other federal agency, any other state agency, or any other entity at all is free to use urban area information, but they use it for their own purposes. And the Census Bureau doesn't create urban areas because of how an organization like Federal Highway Administration might use the urban area information. So the FHWA is a major user, if you will, of urban areas and the information provided by the Census Bureau. And specifically to MPOs, any urban area that exceeds 50,000 or more in population is required to establish a metropolitan planning organization. And the census designated urban area is the minimum planning area for an MPO. So if you, when you achieve that 50,000 threshold, which apparently I didn't realize until the other day, Southern Pines, I think has reached that threshold. And so they will be establishing a new MPO in North Carolina. Once you, so what their boundary will look like, I don't know, but anything in that urban area that's been established down there will have to be included in the new Southern Pines Metropolitan Planning Organization. So our, you can see there on the left, our 2010 urban area in that purple color, and then you can compare that to the 2020 urban area in the green. And I think it's fairly clear as to where changes occurred, particularly to the north, where Statesville is no longer part of the Charlotte urban area. But also if you look to the east in Union County, Marshville is no longer in the urban area either. Sizable portions of the urban area in York County and Lancaster County, for that matter, are no longer within the Charlotte urban area. And we'll get into these into a little bit more detail in a moment. So talked about an urban area. Now let's talk about a planning area. So a planning area is an MPO's area of jurisdiction. And how we establish that boundary is that we work with state, well, any MPO establishes a planning area boundary by working with its state's DOT, the Federal Highway Administration, and of course, local governments. And so it's established in a couple of ways. First, as I mentioned before, the urban area is the minimum planning area. So if it's in that census designated urban area, then that has to be in your MPO, as I mentioned earlier. And then you kind of smooth that urban area boundary to establish a more logical planning area. Because as you can see on the previous side, I guess it might be a little clearer here on that 2010 urban area slide. There are gaps in the urban area oftentimes. It's some jagged edges, if you will. So you want to smooth that out to make a more consistent planning area. And then last, and definitely not least, is that FHWA guidance states that any planning area should incorporate areas that you expect to be urban within the next 20 years. So yes, you have that core urban area established by the Census Bureau, but in most cases, at least here in the Charlotte region, that population growth is going to continue. So your urban area is going to expand. Well, it's best for transportation planning purposes to incorporate that area now, as opposed to waiting for the next 10 years or even the next 20 years for that matter. So that's the difference between a planning area boundary and an urban area boundary. Very much related, but two different things. So what happened was that our urban area population increased by 130,431 persons, but the actual area decreased by 109 square miles. So a fairly substantial contraction in the planning area. And you can see the numbers there in the table. The difference is we went from 776 square miles, almost 777 square miles, to just under 668 square miles. So fairly substantial, again, contraction in the urban area. And so why that happened is that the Census Bureau changed criteria to designate urban areas from the 2010 census and even from the 2000 census. There were probably two changes that most likely affected us. One relates to how you include non-contiguous territory. There's this hop and jump category within the criteria that would allow you to kind of reach out and grab a qualifying area that is otherwise not connected to the main urban area. And so the jump that had been established earlier at maybe the 2000 census, maybe prior to that, was 2.5 miles. And so with the 2020 census, the Census Bureau changed that to 1.5 miles. So that is probably what caused both Statesville and Marshville to come out of the Charlotte urban area. And then there was an overall change in what is a qualifying urban area. It really shifted from establishing density by housing units versus population. So changed from 2,500 persons, a minimum threshold, to 2,000 housing units or 5,000 persons. So fairly substantial changes that have had a big impact on us. So where it happened, and I went over this a few minutes ago, in terms of South Carolina, we had lost 35.7 square miles where that area was assigned to the Rock Hill urban area. We still have some of the Charlotte urban area in South Carolina, but it's a relatively minimal amount. In Northern Iredell County, it was 32.8 square miles where Statesville is no longer in the urban area. There was a portion of the Charlotte urban area in Lincoln County with 17.6 square miles. That's now classified as rural. We were not planning for Lincoln County. They were not a part of the MPO. After the 2010 census, there was a lot of discussion about what to do with Lincoln County. Ultimately, they opted to become part of the Gaston Cleveland Lincoln MPO. But at this point, that organization doesn't have to plan for that area unless Lincoln County wants to remain in. It's now classified as rural. In Eastern Union County, it was a relatively small amount of 5.4 square miles, but that did result in Marshville being removed from the Charlotte urban area. In Western Mecklenburg County, this was a bit of an odd one. There's an area around the Whitewater Center here in Mecklenburg County, about 10.3 square miles. That's now in the Gastonia urban area. That's one of the things I can't explain. I don't know how it works. And maybe we'll get an explanation from the Census Bureau, but that's a bit of a mystery to me. Similar situation in Eastern Mecklenburg County, where about 7.5 square miles is now in the Concord urban area that had previously been in the Charlotte urban area. And then there was the very small portion of Catawba County right across Highway 150 that had been in the Charlotte urban area. That's now classified as rural as well. And the South Carolina portion, by the way, some of that's a bit of a mystery too, because suddenly the urban area is following the state line, which I don't know if I've ever seen before, a urban area following a political jurisdiction line like that, but that's what came out of the Census Bureau. Did want to get into Marshville and Statesville and talk a little bit about them. As I mentioned a couple of times, both are no longer officially in the Charlotte urban area. However, they can remain as active CRTPO members. And in case of Marshville, I'll mention again that FHWA guidance about including urban areas, or including areas expected to be urban in 20 years, to include those in an MPO's planning area. And I think that with the growth we're experiencing in this region, it's likely that Marshville will come back into the urban area after the 2030 census. As to Statesville, they are now classified as an urban area, but it is below the MPO threshold, so they cannot form a separate MPO. It was probably eliminated from the Charlotte urban area for the same reason that Marshville was, that jump reduction in the jump length. But like Marshville, it's our thought, as staff's thought, that with the region's growth, that it's highly likely that Statesville will come back into the Charlotte urban area after the 2030 census. And then I think an argument for both communities remaining within the MPO as active members is that they are able to use our discretionary funds. If you're not an active member of the MPO, you don't have access to those dollars. So there are a few next steps. There is coming out soon, I hope, some FHWA guidance on how we go about changing boundaries or incorporating new territory or anything that might directly affect us. Again, we probably don't have to change our planning area boundary, but we do want to see the FHWA guidance. There is, I think, some additional information from NCDOT, although we got some information earlier this week, just some mapping, but there might be some additional information coming from NCDOT. We do want to get official confirmation from both Marshville and Statesville about whether or not they want to remain in the MPO. We will have to take action to reaffirm the planning area boundary. That will require action by the TCC and the MPO and the board. And then we will have to update metropolitan planning agreements with our neighboring MPOs, because where the Charlotte urban area extends into, say, for example, the Rock Hill, Fort Mill Area Transportation Study, the MPO for Rock Hill. We will have to have an agreement with them stating that they will fully implement the metropolitan planning process for those portions of the Charlotte urban area within their jurisdiction and vice versa across all the MPOs. So that'll be a next step, but probably not an immediate next step. So that was a lot to cover. I'm happy to answer any questions about this.
All right, questions for Bob, Andrew?
Just a quick question. If Statesville had met that 50,000 threshold, would they be required to basically create their own MPO?
I don't think they would necessarily be required to. I mean, you could look at the letter of the law or the letter of the regulation and say maybe, but they would not be absolutely required to. They could elect to remain as a part of CRTPO.
Does it decrease the opportunity?
It decreases it by a lot because it's down to zero. If you're in the urban area boundary, or if you're not in the urban area boundary, but you're in the CRTPO's planning area, then that does not change your ability to use discretionary funds. Nothing changes. Yeah. But if you elect to not be a part of then it's down to zero.
The population increasing.
I think that's definitely a to be determined, because in theory, yes, because the allocation of PL dollars is based in part on population, but it's a pretty much a static amount. And now that there's a new MPO in North Carolina, they'll be using PL dollars. Now, it won't be a huge amount because I don't know if Southern Pines exceeded that 50,000 threshold by an extraordinary amount. I think it was a relative effective. In fact, I think it might have just squeaked over the line. But it will be using PL dollars to support its activities. And I think a number of the other MPOs increased in population, but some actually decreased in population, the urban area populations. And that's how it's established, how much money you get. It's not based upon your planning area population, it's based upon your urban area population.
Bob, on that next to the last slide, where does the MOU evaluation fall in that list of activities?
It's not directly related to the urban area boundary. It's not an automatic requirement for an MPO to reassess its MOU based upon the release of urban area information. But traditionally, we have done that here in Charlotte. Every 10 years, we'll look at it and that's mainly because each time we've added new jurisdictions. This might be the first time in several censuses that we've not added new members, but I think the tradition has been established. So we don't have to do it, but I think the tradition is there, and we will be starting that relatively soon. In fact, next month's board meeting, we anticipate the chairman to be appointing a subcommittee to start work on that. We have engaged the services of a facilitator to help with that process, with that board subcommittee. So it is embedded in here, but I want to be clear, it's not required as a part of the urban area boundary change.
Thank you. And then just for, I guess, Marshville and Statesville, those communities are aware of what process and support the CRTPO staff can give them to confirm.
I believe so.
Okay.
We do need to officially reach out to them. I've had a conversation with Sherry Ashley with the city of Statesville, and she did not give me any indication that the city is considering a change. I have not talked to Marshville officials yet.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Bob, just one question. Is there any potential, let me phrase it that way, for it to affect the weighted voting or the contributions local governments make to the MPO?
I think both of those items will be the subject of considerable discussion with this MOU subcommittee. a number of board members have made it clear that they do want to look at the weighted vote. And then with the population changes, we really have to look at how the local cost share obligations are allocated. Some communities had a significant increase in population. Other communities maybe had probably increases, but maybe not as rapid. So we want to make sure that the burden is fairly distributed. Right now, it's based strictly on population. So if you are like the city of Charlotte was around 60% of the planning area population. Now I think it's 57%. I might be wrong on those numbers or those percentages, but so the city would pay 57% in theory of the local match requirements.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to our last section in our meeting. Again, Anil and Theo have included updates on NCDOT Division 10 and 12 projects in your agenda packets. They're not going to do a presentation, but I'll pause for a minute if anybody has any questions for them. And next, we've got Alex with Integrated Mobility, who has an update for us.
I do, thank you. I'll start again by congratulating Charlotte for being awarded a Safe Streets and Roads for All award. This was for an implementation grant. I think they were awarded, I was doing this on the train this morning, so could be iffy, but I believe they were awarded about $4.4 million for proven countermeasures to implement Vision Zero. So that's very exciting, and I look forward to seeing the work that's produced there. They also announced, I think, 11 or more planning grants around the state of North Carolina. Kannapolis received one, DCHC, Raleigh, Greensboro, but some smaller communities did as well. So they did mention on their website, the FHWA's website, that they anticipate opening that up again in April. So keep your eyes open and start thinking if you're interested in doing some sort of safety plan. It might be well worth thinking about. And of course, IMD, I think, would fully support that and want to help out as much as we could. So wanted to mention that. Talking about other things before I get to some of the stuff I've already mentioned. I did mention, well, sort of, the bicycle helmets initiative that we do, the children's bicycle helmets that we give out every year. That deadline is tomorrow. On February 3rd. So if you haven't yet applied, please do so. I think we gave out about 20,000 helmets in 2022. So I would love to give some to y'all as well. Any of your municipalities or other groups that are interested in doing that. And next week is the closing deadline for our Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program. So again, hopefully you've probably already decided at this point whether you're going to apply or not, but just be mindful of that deadline if you have not yet submitted. I was late, as I always am, because I take the train and then the bus over here. So I missed the resolutions, but the trail feasibility study, we received approximately 65 applications statewide. Staff has scored those. I can tell you that 25 projects were selected. I cannot tell you what they are, but I will say that the Board of Transportation meeting will be approving those next week. So if one were to say, look at their agenda, one might find out, what projects are being proposed for funding. So that's not official until they approve it. But so if you're interested, in discovering that, I recommend that. Congratulations to those that were awarded funds, and for those that were not. Certainly there was a huge demand and cry for this, and we just had $2.5 million for that total. So I strongly suspect that we'll be trying to secure funding for that for another round, or maybe make that permanent, but I don't know at this point. So but yeah, clearly around the state, there was a great demand for that. Finally, I mentioned three things last time I was here, the multimodal planning studies. of which Indian Trails just kicked off. So looking forward to working with you on that. We also are working with Oakboro, or I'm working with Oakboro and Elon, Belmont, and others. So the 2024 call will be the application process. I was told yesterday, we are anticipating that actually opening next week. So we anticipate that being a 2-month process, or an application window, I should say. And with the webinar probably to follow sometime in March, probably for interested parties that are interested in doing that. I mentioned 2 transit related studies that we're looking to do at IMD. One is micro transit feasibility studies. For logistical reasons that I promised you guys late January, clearly failed. Early March or February also failed. But we are, I think, looking tentatively at the end of this month to open up that process. Transit agencies or other municipal groups that run the transit agencies will be eligible to apply for that. And the other program, which is Access to Transit, which is kind of looking at the built environment around transit stops and things like that, and trying to work, do some planning studies on that. So those both we anticipate opening up in late February, but I may be back here in March saying some other things. So we'll see. But those are really all the things I wanted to talk about. So congratulations to those that were awarded various grants. And yeah, I'll answer any questions everybody has any, but thank you.
Thank you, Alex. All right, Warren, you have an update for us? Yeah, we'll get you.
Yeah, make sure to turn it on.
Thank you. I realize individually, many of you may be aware of this, but collectively, I want to make sure you know that this is one of the most significant months in Turnpike Authority history. For more than 10 years, the NC Quick Pass system has worked on the same software. I don't know how many people in the room are using the same software on major things they did 10 years ago, but after several years of planning, we are changing that this month. So in case you haven't seen the emails, because I'm assuming everybody's an NC Quick Pass customer, starting February 17th, our entire system's going down for about 8 days till February 24th or through February 24th to allow for shifting all of the millions of customer data points over to a new back office system. We're very excited about this. It's going to dramatically increase things we can do for people technologically. It's going to change the way people can interact with us for the better. I was just talking with you earlier about how clunky the myncquickpass.com interface is. That's a legacy of an old time. The new one, you'll be able to go through the NC Quick Pass website. We'll have more control over that. I'm also looking forward to this system enabling us to get more creative in how we distribute transponders. Right now, it's you call for one, you sign up for one online, or you have to go to a customer service center. We may be able to expand that with our new system. So just something to be aware of, that between February 17 and February 24, the system will be down, not active. Now, we will still be recording tolls on our facilities. That's not going to change. We have backups at every gantry that will be recording that, but we are extending, for those who are invoiced by mail, we are extending deadlines, due dates for that because of this shutdown. And no one's going to be able to do anything during those days. But if you're on our facility, we'll still document that and charge you accordingly afterwards. Thus, if there's anything you want to clear up about your system, about your own account, probably be good to do it before February 17th. Otherwise, it'll be a while before you can do so. But Madam Chair, we're very excited about this. We've been pushing out emails to our customers. We're getting about a 60% open rate, which I'm told in the email world is fantastic. And Judy's nodding, so I'll take that. But thank you. And again, it's because of CRTPO that we've been able to get to this point, because the facilities that CRTPO requested have dramatically improved our customer base, and that's made it helpful to upgrade our system. So if there are any questions, I can take those, but other than that, I'll just go sit down again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. No additional updates from POC today. Curtis, do you have anything for us from the Bike and Ped work group?
If you'll take a look in your agendas, we do have two items today. The first is an update on the recent Carolinas Fair Trail Forum from Brett Baronet. Brett joined us last month. He's going to come back and talk to us again this month. I think he mentioned that this past forum was one of his best. I think he had the best attendance. So looking forward to some lessons learned from that. I'm also going to talk about our bicycle suitability map refresh. Last time we updated it was in 2016. I want to had a couple of fits and starts, but we want to go ahead and take a look at potential scope for updating that bicycle suitability map. So we'll talk about that this afternoon. If you're free, please join us upstairs at 2 o'clock. Any questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Curtis. No update on craft this month, but we do have several upcoming issues. I'll turn it over to Travis for a few of those.
Great, thank you. First, we'll call on Brian to give us an update on the strategic plan.
Thank you, Travis. Good morning. So in my new role with CRTPO, I will be leading our implementation efforts for the strategic plan. As part of that, I will be giving regular updates to this TCC and board about our progress. CRTPO staff is currently in the process of implementing Goal 6, which is expanding regional transportation funding strategies. That includes working to educate members on how to identify, pursue, and write grants. And to that end, staff is working with the Central Atlanta Regional Council to organize a grant writing workshop for our member jurisdictions. We are also championing efforts to find funding to support Connect Beyond and Beyond 77. The Beyond 77 task force met earlier this week, and they are working towards pursuing funding soon, later this year. Furthermore, we will start work on goals 5 and goal 1 later in this year, and I will come back later with more details on that.
Thank you. Next, we have a save the date. So everyone is invited for the Mobility for the Future and Appreciation Celebration. The CRTPO is going to celebrate and express our gratitude for successful planning initiatives over the past several years. So we invite you to join us in the CMGC lobby from 4:30 to 5:45 p.m. on Wednesday, March 15th. An electronic invitation will be following soon, and light hors d'oeuvres will be served. So mark your calendar. Additionally, when you came in today, you received the quarterly public engagement summary. This is again what we were receiving each quarter. So if you have any questions, Judy will be available to answer any questions, but just make sure you got a copy of the latest version. And then 2 housekeeping items. First, as a reminder, if you are not sitting at the TCC table, it would be a big favor to me if you signed in on the sign-in sheet to help me with the meeting minutes. And then also for the parking system, as you notice, the parking system has changed since the last time you were here. You are no longer receiving a stamp, but you should have received a separate piece of paper with a scan item on it. So when you leave the garage, you will scan your initial parking ticket, and then you will scan the voucher we gave you, and that should open the door to let you out. So everyone make sure you have 2 pieces of paper before you leave here, because that'll be essential to get out of the garage. And then those are our items.
All right, thank you, Travis. I'll pause for a minute. Any further questions before we adjourn? Go ahead, Dana.
Just a quick question. If anyone knows of how to get in touch with Google or any of the services that provide routing, we're struggling with some of the trucks in our area going through areas that are not safe, and we are running into a brick wall on how to navigate that system. So I'm not sure if anyone in the room has a contact for me, but I'd appreciate it.
They respond, not they actually back, but things get fixed.
Do you can forward it to me, or like who your contact is? Okay.
I mean, Charlotte, we found them pretty responsive with road closure information, which is a little bit different than what you're describing.
Do you have a contact, or can I talk to whoever that person is who does that work? Is that
Yes.
Andy?
Somebody in CDOT. We'll
Okay,
put you in
great.
touch.
Thank
with
you.
them.
I appreciate it.
All right. With that, everyone, as always, thank you for your time and participation in the important work that we do in this region in planning for transportation. And may I have a motion to adjourn? And a second, you got them both. Awesome. All those in favor, please stand up and have a wonderful February.